Well, that sure was emotional. Spider-Man Lotus, the film that was so incredibly hyped once upon a time. I mean, the entire world was just on the edge of their seat to see, what is Gavin Konop and co. going to be creating, but then suddenly that all completely changed when past tweets from both Gavin Konop, the creator of Spider-Man Lotus, as well as lead actor Warden Wayne, was seen to be racist and discriminatory in certain messages. I mean, it is worth mentioning that subsequently they have apologized and have done this on a number of different occasions. But for some people it is very difficult to separate the performers with the performer, which I do actually think is one of the reasons why The Flash was such a bomb from a box office perspective, because of all of Ezra Miller's particular past. If you're wondering why it's called Spider-Man Lotus in its first instance, it's because Gavin has described the film as, being a flower that blossoms in amongst a lot of mud and a lot of negativity and misery, but yet is able to be this beautiful creation, which I do think is actually quite a nice metaphor for what the film actually represents, which is based on two big comic book storylines. The first one being Spider-Man Blue, where Peter Parker is remembering and reminiscing and actually recording a tape recounting all of his past experiences and memories of Gwen Stacey, which he does actually do in this film. So I feel like it was actually really, really faithful to that particular comic book storyline, and it really is heart-wrenching. I mean, if their core objective was to get this audience to cry because of everything that was happening in this movie, then I do actually think that they were really successful with this, because it's so heart-wrenching, and I just feel like Peter Parker and Spider-Man are just such incredible characters, and as so many people can call themselves a Spider-Man superfan, I feel like this is able to connect with people instantly because they know all of this past storyline, so it really is able to pull on your heartstrings. And the second comic book storyline that is based upon is called The Kid Who Collects Spider-Man, and I just thought it was so powerful too from Tim's perspective, a terminally ill patient who is a true Spider-Man superfan, and he is able to really help Spider-Man get over his depression and really does pull him out of negativity and back into his positive space, and he really does show that, the Spider-Man mantle is a representation for hope for a number of different people. So by helping other people, he in turn is able to help himself. So I just thought the Tim character was just so incredible, and similarly to Gwen Stacey, was really able to make you feel so much. And from an emotional storytelling perspective, I have to say the writing in this film was so good. I mean, if you were going into this expecting to see a lot of action and a number of different Spider-Man villains, and to see all of the cool stuff that you maybe are used to seeing, perhaps in the 90s animated series, or of course in the movies too, then I feel like, it is a little bit disappointing from that perspective, because the storyline is so totally radically different. But to their credit, in all of the trailer footage, they haven't tried to disguise what this film is. If anything, they've played into the fact that, it is a bit of an emotional love letter, particularly with the Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy storyline. And I mean, certain aspects, of course, you have seen in other medium. For example, Andrew Garfield speaking to a kid at the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2. And speaking of second Spider-Man movie installments, of course, the whole of Spider-Man 2 is centered around the Spider-Man No More storyline, which Tobey Maguire absolutely smashed in terms of, really seeing the difficulties of balancing both Peter Parker and Spider-Man, which I feel like Gavin and Warden Wayne definitely do build upon in this film from an emotional perspective. And speaking of Warden Wayne, I actually have to say, I feel like his performance was pretty decent. I mean, it's a very different type of Peter Parker that we're used to. He's a lot more of a jerk, really edgy, which is ironic, as a lot of people were criticizing Andrew Garfield's portrayal of being a complete opposite experience of what you're used to seeing with Tobey Maguire's portrayal across the first three films. And now we're seeing Warden Wayne as being completely different, and I feel like there's a real contrast to Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Incidentally though, Tom Holland's Spider-Man really did experience a lot of the grief that Warden Wayne's portrayal of this character was going through, which of course happened in No Way Home. But out of all of them, I feel like you really do get to see all of the depression, all of the guilt-ridden aspects of this character, as well as being really outspoken. But what I did love is in that first sequence with Shocker, you really do get to see the funny, jokey side of this character too. Sean Thomas Reid was really good as Harry Osborn, showing a really broken side to him as well. And I feel like, we have seen this, of course, with James Franco in the first and second and third Spider-Man movies, and then of course with Dane DeHaan in Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I think Harry Osborn is just such an interesting character, as of course he's got that underlying jealousy with Peter Parker, as from his perspective, he gets to see that Peter just gets everything that he really wants, but of course at the same time Harry is so privileged because he's got access to so much money. But what is also true to form with this character is that he was significantly bullied by Norman Osborn, so this really has played on him, and I feel like the portrayal of Harry Osborn in this movie really can be seen from that lens. Gwen Stacey is always a tragic character. I mean, recently, of course, she is now taking on the mantle of Spider-Gwen, so it's a bit of a different aspect to that character, but at least from the death of Gwen Stacy's perspective, of course, this character is really, really sad. I would have liked to see a bit more chemistry between her and Peter Parker, as it is such a pivotal aspect of this storyline in this Spider-Man Lotus film, and instead, what you see is him being a little bit bashful, a little bit shy around her, so you don't get to really see how strong they were as a couple, but still you do get to see, the impact for sure that Gwen Stacy has on a number of different characters. I think it's interesting what they did with MJ is they did try to keep her party girl aspects within her character true, but of course she is mourning over the death of her best friend. But what I did like is the trinity that they created with MJ, Harry and Peter in this film. Like I said, Tim was absolutely outstanding. I did not expect this character to totally steal the film in some respects. I feel like he was so good, especially with all of the posters, all of the video games, all of the cartoons, everything that was happening through the Tim character. I feel like he was so brilliant, and it was just so sad what happened to him. Flash Thompson was alright. The only portrayal that I've absolutely loved of Flash Thompson so far is in Amazing Spider-Man, as I think that portrayal of Flash was absolutely brilliant and is exactly the type of character that I've always seen him as in the comic books. I feel like this version of Flash was alright. Like I said, I absolutely loved the opening of this film. That is what I was expecting to see a little bit more of in terms of the hilarity between his fight with Shocker. I thought that was so good, especially when he was making fun of his costume. And I think, considering that this is a fan-made project, I do think actually that battle was really, really good. But everything that transpired after that was, of course, an incredibly emotionally driven storyline with all of the flashbacks, and then, of course, all of the different storylines that were taking place with Gwen Stacy as well as with Tim. It was really, really good though. All of the little Easter eggs that they had in this movie, for example, MJ calling him Tiger, seeing all of the Rogue Gallery villains that Tim has in his scrapbook. Gavin has teased that they have got more things to come, so it would be really interesting to see if there is going to get a sequel and a third movie, and then maybe Sony and Marvel might even sponsor it to give it even more budget. And then, of course, we have another fan-made project coming soon, which is going to be called Spider-Man Convergence, which apparently also has Miles Morales in there. I think it is a little bit of a shame that all of the drama that took place off-screen has kind of eclipsed and overshadowed the film itself, as at one stage it seemed so untouchable, especially as John Watts, director of the MCU Spider-Man movies, was a bit of a fan of this, as well as Andrew Garfield being a fan of this, as he was in the co-pilot seat with Gavin's father. But you can't hide away from the fact that this movie definitely could have benefited from a little bit more diversity, which I'm sure they will do in a second and third one if they ever do get them made. And I would have loved a few more villains, a few more action sequences, and a bit more on the Green Goblin, especially if you're focusing on this villain so much. You could have at least explored it a little bit more. However, that being said, considering that this movie only had really $100,000 to play with, I feel like what they achieved was really, really impressive, especially all of the swinging sequences. They were absolutely outstanding, and I just can't wait to see what potentially could happen in a second and third installment. As from a casting point of view, I do think they have something good on their hands, but let's just see what the reception is going to be. For all of the reasons that I've said in this review, I'm going to give it a solid 6 out of 10. Now I'd love to hear what you thought of Spider-Man Lotus, so let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in my next video.